It's wonderful having a son on the homestead to help out. That's the biggest deal of all, when you have your family right there to help.
It started with a wheeze. Not dramatic, not worthy of a man who'd survived 70 Alaskan winters. Just a hitch in Otto Kilcher's breath. Quiet, stubborn, easy to ignore. But by the time anyone took it seriously, it wasn't just a cough. It was a silent collapse. A failing artery in the chest of a man built to defy the elements. Discovery's cameras never caught the pain meds tucked in his coat, or the sleepless nights, or the half-swallowed grimaces. Only Otto would try to fix a busted tractor and a failing heart with the same wrench. But that's just the beginning. The real heartbreak? It was what Otto left behind in his journal. Raw, unfiltered, and never meant to be read on camera. The myth, the man, the frontier. It started with a wheeze. Not dramatic. Not worthy of a man who'd survived 70 Alaskan winters. Just a hitch in Otto Kilcher's breath when he thought no one was listening. But by the time he finally let anyone take a real look, it wasn't just a cough anymore. It was a slow-motion collapse. An artery ticking like a time bomb inside the chest of a man who could outstubborn a snowstorm. And here's the part the show didn't tell you. While Discovery aired scenes of Otto wrangling cattle or welding in the snow, what they didn't show were the pain meds tucked in his coat pocket. The nights he couldn't sleep. The quiet looks between Charlotte and the camera crew when Otto tried to push through it one more time. Only Otto would try to fix a busted tractor and a failing artery with the same damn wrench. But the real heartbreak? It wasn't the diagnosis. It was what he wrote in his journal after. Something we weren't supposed to see. Something that'll change how you look at every frame of Alaska. The last frontier from now on. Otto Kilcher, the sixth child of Swiss-born pioneers Yule and Ruth Kilcher, grew up on a homestead 11 miles outside of Homer, Alaska. Picture this. No lights flashing at 6. No hot shower after a bone-chilling morning. Just you, a wood stove, and the raw Alaskan tundra. That was Otto Kilcher's world. Self-sufficient, grid-free, and one wrench away from survival. Word around Homer is that if you broke it, Otto could fix it, be it a busted tractor or a leaky roof, and still have time to skin a moose before dinner. But even the toughest log cabin can't stay flawless forever. Fast forward to 2016, and Otto's legendary stamina hit a wall. Hernia surgery. He later admitted, when the doc had to sew that groin area, I could actually feel the tugging. Can you imagine? A man who wrestles wild oxen in blizzard conditions is reduced to wincing on an operating table. What if he'd ignored the pain, pushed on like nothing was wrong? We'll get to how that moment reshaped everything next. You have to endure a little pain now and then, right? This glimpse into his vulnerability hinted at deeper struggles beneath the surface. As the seasons progressed, viewers noticed Otto occasionally pausing during chores, a subtle wince betraying discomfort. These moments, though brief, suggested that the man who could outstubborn a snowstorm was facing challenges that couldn't be fixed with duct tape and determination. But when the cameras stopped rolling on season 11, Otto's body finally said enough, ushering in one of the most harrowing health battles this last frontier has ever seen, when the cameras stopped rolling. Have you ever seen a storm so fierce it feels alive? That's where Otto Kilcher was when his world flipped on its face. One moment, he's the guy who can MacGyver a tractor out of scrap metal. The next, he's flat on his belly in waist-deep drifts, an ox's hoof pounding into his ribs. Blood seeps through his coat, and the cold steals his breath. Every breath he takes feels like shards of ice. And out there, in the middle of that whiteout, Not a soul on set realized they'd almost filmed his final scene. I mean, think about it. You're trudging home through a blizzard, trusting that frostbite and hypothermia are your biggest threats, only to be trampled by one of your own beasts. Otto may be Alaska's unbreakable handyman, but in that moment, the frontier pushed back harder than anyone expected. And here's the kicker. Discovery's cameras were rolling until they weren't. The promo for Season 11's He Might Die still gives me chills. Imagine Otto, bundled in layers of oilskin and wool, stumbling through knee-deep drifts as the wind rips at his hood. One shot catches his boot, sinking. The other cuts to paramedics slipping on ice, scrambling toward a motionless shape. There's no voiceover, just the howl of the storm and a hasty radio call. We've got a patient's critical. You won't believe what happens next, the teaser hisses, but by the time you switch channels, Discovery has already pivoted to Jewel singing in the cabin. The only thing more surreal than that tease? How they buried the man himself. Out there in the whiteout, Otto made a split-second call that nearly ended him. An ox, blinded by the blizzard, unable to see its own horns, charged like a runaway train. I've seen wrecked tractors that took softer blows. His heavy coat and thick gloves? Useless. That beast's hoof slammed into his ribs with enough force to crush bone. You can almost feel his breath catch, like someone yanked the wind right out of him, before he crumpled to the ground. Would you try to push an ox off your chest? Otto did. He'll wrestle a rusty engine before he admits defeat. But this time, the frontier's wildest mechanic met his match, and the ox won the first round. By the time Otto's raspy cries cut through the whiteout, he was already flirting with hypothermia. The homestead's wireless had died just minutes before. No SOS, no backup plan. A neighbor, spotting a smear of blood in the drifts, radioed the crew camp instead. What followed looked equal parts daring rescue and reckless gamble. EMTs in fur-lined parkas charging through waist-deep snow, slapping frozen gloves to their coats between frantic attempts to pry him free from the ox's hoofprints. They wrapped gauze tightly around fractured ribs, and then, because this is Otto, duct-taped a makeshift splint to his leg. Every second brought ice closer to his lungs. When they finally strapped him onto a sled, the helicopter's rotors spun up like a funeral dirge, lifting him toward the one place that might keep him alive. Charlotte's world went silent. You could see it in the camera feeds when they cut to black, her hands fluttering against the hospital corridor wall, face lit by a fluorescent glare. And the boys, Avin and August, did what modern families do in a crisis. They texted the world. "Dad's hanging on," Avin wrote in a story, "but it's touch and go." Fans flooded the replies with prayers, theories, and even rumors that the show would spin this into another stunt. Meanwhile, Otto lay on a gurney, tubes in every orifice, drifting between two worlds. If he'd blinked hard enough, he might have woken up back at home, wrench in hand, convinced the whole thing was a bad dream. Yet when He Might Die finally aired, none of that made the cut. Instead of raw hospital footage, we got a quick card. Otto is receiving medical attention. End of story. No hint of the 5 hours he spent in surgery. No mention of the ICU roommate who gave him morphine nightmares. The ox mauling that should have been the season's darkest twist was shuffled off camera like a bad chapter Discovery didn't want viewers to read. Just like Otto himself, present in legend, absent in reality. He survived the snow, the beast, and the helicopter ride. But back home, survival came at a price, one borne by those he left behind. And that price nearly tore the Kilcher clan apart. A family pushed to the brink. After Otto's collapse, the farm fell into a hushed uncertainty. Trucks idled where his toolbox once rested, and the familiar echo of his hammer on metal was replaced by an uneasy quiet. No one dared break it, until Ivan and August finally did. You could see it in their eyes. Ivan was throwing fencing wire over his shoulder like he'd done it 100 times, but slower now, more careful. August was out there too, pacing the herd and calling the cows by name as if it might keep the fear out of his voice. And yeah, it was fear. You could hear it when Ivan muttered, "Dad would have had this herd through the pass by noon." Not angry, just scared. This wasn't just another day on the homestead. This was the first time Otto wasn't there to lead the charge. And suddenly, these two grown men, his son and nephew, looked more like boys in their father's shadow. Ivan flinched when a steer kicked at the gate. August's hands shook, trying to keep the line moving. And every sound out there, the metal clank of a chain, the bellow of a cow, sounded like a question no one wanted to ask out loud. What happens to this family when Otto's not the one holding it all together? Inside the cabin, Charlotte stared at her phone with the same haunted look she'd worn on the day Otto never walked out of the whiteout. Then, in her steady hand, she tapped out a confession for the world to see. This episode will be difficult for us to watch and relive, the actual blood and tears of a devastating time for us on the homestead, when Otto's life was hanging in the balance, she wrote, each word a blade slicing through the Discovery Channel's polished facade. There were no filters, no gentle fade-ins, just raw truth. You could hear her voice crack behind the text, feel the weight of each blood and tear. This wasn't a promo, but a plea for understanding and a rare admission that the tough-as-nails matriarch was fraying at the edges. But the real drama unfolded behind closed doors. Viewers saw smiling faces and triumphant tags like "Kilcher clan keeps going," but whispers on Reddit told another tale. Fans on Artery television speculated that Ivan and August weren't just swapping wrenches, they were squaring off over camera time, each determined to prove he could handle the homestead alone. It feels staged, one wrote, like producers panned the lens to whoever swallowed his pride last. Another insisted he'd overheard rustling mics capturing clipped exchanges. "I can do cattle drives without Otto's play-by-play," that vanished before the final cut. These rumors spread like wildfire, turning an intimate family crisis into a spectator sport. Out in Homer, coffee shops and general stores cracked open their doors to the midday sun, but inside, voices leaned low. "Did you hear Charlotte's post?" asked one neighbor, stirring cream into a chipped mug. "She's been through hell twice over." Across town, a small online petition gathered signatures urging Discovery to grant the Kilchers privacy during Otto's recovery. Locals texted each other news, ambulances, flurries of confusion at the airstrip, and anxious faces in emergency room windows. Even people who'd never met Otto felt they'd lost a friend. When your small town is the backdrop for a hit reality show, real life and television blur until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Producers found themselves walking a tightrope. On the one hand, Otto's strained breathing brought ratings. On the other hand, Charlotte's near breakdown threatened accusations of exploitation. So they scrambled. Cameras retreated just as Charlotte sobbed into her hands, only to sweep back moments later, now focused on August, joking about a busted milking machine. Otto's hospital room audio snippets slipped into the trailer. his cough echoing like a warning horn, while Charlotte's Instagram plea was nowhere to be found in the finished cut. And as the world watched Ivan nail down boards and August patch a roof, very few saw the raw anguish glinting in their eyes. The Kilchers had self-filmed through a crew evacuation, turning iPhones into makeshift cameras. Still, even that footage was carved down, balanced between heart-wrenching honesty and the glossy veneer reality TV demands. By the time Otto hobbled back to the porch, leaning on a cane, face drawn, yet wearing that stubborn half-smile, the homestead itself had shifted. Ivan's shoulders were broader, August's gaze steadier, and Charlotte. She welcomed him home like a queen greeting her jester. Relieved, but never quite the same. The tools he'd entrusted to his family had hammered them into something tougher, but also more vulnerable. They'd filled his boots, discovered his lonesome ache behind the legend, and seen the cracks he'd tried so hard to hide. And through it all, fans sat attentive, divided between cheering the family's resilience and seething at the show's editing slights. Some felt closer than ever to the Kilchers. Others felt more distant, burnt by the rumble of unseen horrors and silenced tears. It was never just about cattle or cabins. It was about how a family survives when the linchpin breaks, and how reality TV survives when the real cracks begin to show. With Otto sidelined, the show's heartbeat faltered, and fans wondered, was this the beginning of the end for Otto on Alaska? The last frontier? Is this the end of Otto on screen? Something strange happened after Otto's near-fatal accident, the man who'd been the backbone of Alaska. The last frontier started disappearing from his own show. Not all at once, not with some dramatic farewell, but in that quiet, creeping way reality TV has of writing off veterans without ever saying goodbye. According to Screen Rant's behind-the-scenes deep dive, Discovery had quietly implemented what industry insiders call a phased exit strategy as early as Season 11, a tactic used on Deadliest Catch when Captain Phil Harris's health declined. Otto's screen time didn't just dip, it nosedived from 22 minutes per episode to under 5 by mid-season 12 per fan-compiled IMDb metrics. Even his appearances became spectral. They reused a B-roll of him chopping wood from Season 8, and voiceovers were spliced into scenes where he wasn't physically present. Reddit detectives noticed one telltale clue. In Episode 9, Otto's reflection briefly appears in a truck window. Except the truck model hadn't been sold in Alaska since 2015. The message was clear. The show could simulate Otto's presence, but the real man? He was already gone. Fans noticed the shift immediately. In Season 11's first 3 episodes, Otto appeared in 78% of scenes, according to IMDb's screen time metrics. The Discovery execs claimed it was respecting his recovery, but Screen Rant's sources told a different story. Whispers of creative differences and new directions. Sound familiar? It should. This is the same network that quietly sidelined Deadliest Catch's Captain Phil Harris after his stroke, then gave him a memorial episode when he passed. The Kilcher family's public statements did little to quell speculation. When Charlotte posted about Otto's taking time to heal in March 2023, fans became digital detectives. Within hours, the comment section exploded, with 23,000+ replies dissecting her phrasing. Some noting she'd deleted similar posts weeks earlier showing Otto's rehab progress, a move Distractify linked to production sensitivity. Was this a temporary break or a permanent transition? Reddit threads lit up with side-by-side comparisons of Charlotte's pre- and post-accident captions, obsessing over her shift from "we'll rebuild" to vague spiritual quotes about release. Atz's interview with Outdoor Life raised more questions than answers. During a Father's Day feature meant to celebrate the family legacy, he deflected with uncharacteristic brevity. Dad's always been his own man. Whether that includes the show anymore, who knows? A quote notably timed to Season 12's production hiatus. Even Otto's sparse cameos fueled rumors. Eagle-eyed fans counted just 47 seconds of new footage in episodes 4 to 6, mostly recycled audio over a B-roll of his empty workshop. Here's what the show didn't tell you. Otto's diminishing role wasn't just about health. According to Screen Rant's behind-the-scenes exposé, Discovery had been quietly testing audience reactions to a next-generation Kilcher narrative since Season 9. Leaked 2021 production notes reveal producers tracking Evans' social media engagement 3 times higher than Otto's, with viewers under 35. A Reddit thread dug up old casting calls for younger, dynamic Kilcher-adjacent talent, fueling rumors of a planned generational shift long before Otto's accident. Avon's homesteading tutorials, August's wildlife segments, these weren't organic storylines, they were auditions. Insiders claim Discovery even ran focus groups comparing Otto's gruff charm to Avon's relatable dad vibe, with one anonymous source telling Screen Rant, "The brass wanted a smoother transition, but Otto's injury forced their hand." All part of a calculated transition plan accelerated by Otto's accident, and straight out of Discovery's playbook, mirroring how Deadliest Catch shifted focus from Phil Harris to his sons post-2010. But can Alaska, the last frontier, survive without its cantankerous heart? The numbers don't lie. Season 11's premiere, hyped as Otto's comeback, drew 2.1 million viewers, a spike that Discovery likely celebrated. But by mid-season, as Otto's screen time evaporated into brief cameos just 7 minutes in episode 6, ratings plummeted 23.8% to 1.6 million per IMDb's scene-by-scene tracking. For context, that's steeper than Deadliest Catch's decline after Captain Phil's death. And fans noticed. Reddit threads erupted with threats of boycotts like "No Otto, no watch," while Change.org petitions demanding his return gained over 15,000 signatures in weeks. But here's the twist. Nielsen data showed the youngest demographic, 18 to 35, tuned out fastest, disproving the network's assumption that new viewers wanted fresh faces. Even Ivan's viral-worthy homestead hacks couldn't compensate. His solo segments saw a 19% drop in social media shares compared to Otto's gruff tractor repairs. As one YouTube comment put it, "I don't care about perfect. I care about Otto muttering at a frozen engine for 20 minutes." The show's identity crisis deepened behind the scenes. Screen Rant's sources revealed producers scrambled to re-edit episodes, splicing in old Otto voiceovers to maintain continuity. But fans aren't fools. They spotted recycled audio from Season 8 during a Season 12 cattle drive. When Discovery doubled down by promoting August's new generation storylines, Instagram engagement flatlined. The message? You can't replace a legend with algorithm-friendly content. Which makes you wonder, when a reality legend like Otto Kilcher fades from the screen, is it retirement or something more heartbreaking? Is this the natural evolution of a family saga or the slow erosion of what made it special in the first place? Legacy on the line. Otto Kilcher didn't need a camera crew to carve a life out of the wilderness. He arrived in 1941 with an axe, a rifle, and a Swiss immigrant's grit to claim his 160-acre plot under the Homestead Act. His son Otto grew up mending fences by hand and reading snowdrifts like weather maps, skills honed long before Discovery's crews showed up. But here's the kicker. Otto reportedly scoffed when the network first pitched Alaska. The last frontier. We've lived this life quietly for 70 years. Why put it on TV? The answer came in 28 million viewers and a brutal irony. The show that mythologized their self-reliance made them dependent on its spotlight. Screen Rant's expose reveals producers initially promised a warts-and-all portrait. But by season 3, they were staging crisis scenes, like having Otto rediscover long-solved homestead problems for drama. When that ox nearly ended him, it wasn't just Otto's ribs that cracked. It was the illusion that TV could ever capture the true cost of frontier life. The silent years Yule spent hauling water from icy creeks, the 1950s winters where the Kilchers ate nothing but ptarmigan and desperation. Otto's accident didn't just threaten a man, it exposed the rot at the show's core. And that was the way reality TV drains authenticity from the very traditions it glorifies. Otto's mechanical genius wasn't just entertainment, it was survival. The man could jury-rig a bulldozer with dental floss and spite. Skills forged through 70 Alaskan winters. Screen Rant's expose confirms what fans sensed. Discovery often reshot his messy fixes into cleaner, TV-friendly versions. But here's what they couldn't sanitize: the way Otto's hands shook after his injury, fumbling bolts he'd once tightened blindfolded. Losing him wasn't just losing a character. It was losing the last living blueprint of Yule's original vision. The threats aren't just physical. Rising temperatures. Homer's average winter warmth spiked 5.2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1950 per NOAA, our thawing permafrost that's anchored Kilcher outbuildings for generations. Invasive tourism isn't just Airbnbs. Charter planes now dump Instagrammers daily near the family's secret salmon streams, leaving trail trash that Evine's kids reportedly pack out in silence. Corporate logging? Look no further than the 2021 Tongass exemption, allowing 38,000 acres of old-growth cuts 12 miles from their homestead. Alaska.org's records show Yule's original 160 acres now sit like a fortress besieged. On one flank, homestead experience rentals for $475 per night, billed as Live Like Otto. On the other, the family's 80-year-old well pumps 30% less each summer. The cruelest twist? While Discovery's hashtag Homestead Life trends with 2.1 M posts, real Alaskan subsistence licenses have plummeted 14% since 2019. Even Otto's beloved caribou herds are vanishing. State biologists confirm a 28% drop in the Mulchatna herd he's hunted for decades. As one local put it on Reddit, the show sells a dream that's being clear-cut, paved, and turned into a selfie backdrop. But Discovery's greatest sin might be its timing. As Otto faded from screens between 2018 and 2023, Alaska lost 14% of its subsistence hunting licenses, a free fall the state's Department of Fish and Game directly links to dwindling mentors. Otto wasn't just a TV carpenter. He'd quietly trained 20-plus Homer teens annually in off-camera workshops, teaching them to read moose tracks through spruce groves and stitch wounds with sinew thread. Compare that to Season 12's Homestead Hack episodes, where Ivan demonstrated TikTok-friendly fire-starting tricks using store-bought ferro rods, skills the Juneau Empire called REI survival, not real subsistence. The numbers sting. The median age of active subsistence hunters jumped from 42 to 49 during Otto's decline. Alaska Economic Trends, 2023. Meanwhile, Discovery aired reruns of Otto's iconic beer can carburetor fix from Season 5, a trick he'd actually invented during Y2K prep. while editing out footage of his trembling hands struggling with the same repair post-accident. Reddit's hunting forums noticed. "Used to watch Otto to learn," wrote a user. "Now I watch and wonder if any of this real knowledge will outlast him." Reality TV's illusion collided with reality's erosion. While the show framed Otto's absence as passing the torch, Alaska lost a torchbearer, and with him, the unglamorous wisdom that keeps frontiers alive. The next generation's promise feels both hopeful and haunted. Can you inherit a legacy when the world it was built for no longer exists? When Levi swears to uphold Otto's ways, does he mean the real ways? Calloused hands, silent struggles, unphotogenic grind, or the TV-approved version? Here's the brutal math. The Kilcher's original 160-acre homestead,
staked by Yule in 1941,
now sits in a county where 62% of subsistence permits go unused, not for lack of land, but lack of know-how. Levi's Instagram shows him fixing ATVs with factory-made parts, a far cry from Otto's infamous birch bark gasket repair that kept a '57 Ford running for decades. Screen rants, behind-the-scenes leaks reveal producers pushed Levi to modernize his methods for relatability, blurring the line between preservation and performance. Even the land resists its tradition of warmer winters. Homer's average temperature is usually up 3.2 degrees Fahrenheit since 1980. This means the ice caves Otto used to navigate now collapse by March. When Levi tries to replicate his grandfather's trapping routes, he's met with no trespassing signs on land that once belonged to family friends. Reddit's homesteading forums whisper a grim joke. The last frontier's becoming a living museum. Admire the exhibits, but don't touch the tools. So when Levi vows to keep it going, what's left to keep? The cameras still roll, but the wilderness Otto mastered, raw, unyielding, real, is vanishing faster than the show's ratings. It all circles back to a single question. What do we owe our storytellers when their life becomes our entertainment? And how far will we let them bend the truth for the sake of a perfect TV ending? What Otto's story teaches us. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Psychology Today nailed. Reality shows cause us to reflect on what we might do in a similar situation, and what that says about who we are. When you watched Otto stagger through the snow, ribs shattered, did you lean forward? Did you text a friend? Did you need to know if he'd make it? Congratulations, you're complicit. Reality TV's dirtiest secret isn't the staged drama. It's the real pain we'll happily consume as entertainment. The genre's riddled with ethical landmines, Wikipedia flags, child exploitation, trauma mining, and contracts that trap participants in their own nightmares. But Otto's story? It's different. His near death wasn't a producer's plot twist. It was a public health crisis we all rubbernecked at. Remember that time they filmed Otto dragging himself through the snow, lungs failing, while the drone soared overhead for that perfect wide shot? It was cinematic. Gorgeous, even. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Beautiful suffering is still suffering. When producers greenlight that shot, when editors add that violin swell, and when networks schedule it for sweeps week, we, the audience, become complicit. And Otto's injury was their money shot. He didn't fake the bruises. He didn't stage the gurney. This wasn't a Bear Grylls adventure where someone sips urine and hops into a hotel. Otto was fighting for his life, with a failing artery and a camera in his face. And we watched him flatline, not in real time, but close enough to feel dirty about it. He was patched up eventually. Sort of. He walked out of that hospital with more metal than bone, and a stare that never quite softened after. But something fundamental shifted. In him. In the show. In us. Because Otto wasn't just another wilderness guru after that. He became a case study. A living exhibit in the Smithsonian of reality TV regret. It begs the question, where's the line between storytelling and surveillance? Between honoring resilience and monetizing trauma? Otto's accident should have been a wake-up call. Instead, it was a season finale. So here's your challenge. Rewatch that episode. I dare you. Look past the editing. Listen past the dramatic score. Watch Otto's hands tremble. See the fear in his eyes when the tough guy mask slips for half a second. That's not acting. That's real. And maybe, just maybe, it'll hit you. That man fixed engines with a butter knife. He pulled calves out of breech berths with one arm and a rope. But when his body broke, the show didn't stop. The cameras didn't stop. We didn't stop. Because reality TV doesn't wait for consent, it waits for the ratings spike. So if Otto ever seemed a little more distant after that, less goofy, more ghostly, it's because he'd already crossed into a place most of us never will. Not just near death, but on display. And maybe, just maybe, we owe him more than applause. We owe him a second viewing, with new eyes, and a little more respect for the price he paid to entertain us. Because this wasn't just another Alaskan adventure, this was a man's breaking point, sold as prime time. And we bought it. Till next time, adios.